Hey everybody, hope everyone's doing well this holiday season. A while back I asked you for some suggestions for Christmas and winter holiday carols or songs. I haven't had a whole lot of time to work on a large orchestral arrangement, but I decided to at least start that process and make a quick video demonstrating what I managed to accomplish. One of your recommendations was the Sussex Carol, and I thought that would be a good one to try. So I started with a few staves. I like to use either 2 or 3 staves to brainstorm and compose. I only wrote about a minute of this arrangement, and if I were to complete the arrangement, I'd probably need another 3 or 4 minutes of music. My version opens with one of these classic orchestral Christmassy introductions that's fairly loud and joyous. It modulates a few times, going from F to A flat and finally to C, which is the dominant. That leads us back into F in measure 13. There's an ostinato figure, then a brief motivic idea in measure 17 that calls back to the opening, and finally the full statement of the carol in measure 21. The arrangement just goes through one iteration of this carol, and like I said, if I were to continue arranging this, I'd repeat the carol several times, possibly moving through different keys or playing around with different types of textures. I'll play the piano MIDI. This is just the exported MIDI from Dorico. I didn't play this in or anything. So for some reason, I had the strange idea to try and orchestrate this arrangement using the Metropolis Ark II library. It's the only Metropolis Ark library that I own, and if you know that library, you know that it's dark, low, and soft. Sort of the exact opposite of what you'd expect with an orchestral Christmas carol. I wanted that challenge to see if I could take only this library and create something Christmassy. And let me tell you, it was not easy. And I'm not sure that I succeeded, but I want to show the results anyway. I also think that this video might be an interesting look at how you really have to use libraries to their strengths if you want them to sound good and realistic. With a library like Metropolis Ark II, I care less about making everything playable to a real-life orchestra because I'm more concerned with the end result sound. Having said that, I'll still try to write idiomatically for the instruments, otherwise you can easily tell that something sounds wrong or fake. It helps to know the ins and outs of a library, the strengths and weaknesses, because a library like this doesn't do everything. No libraries can, but this one in particular is more about creating an ambiance. So to use it to write a Christmas carol, a joyous one no less, seems a bit silly, but that was sort of the point. So one of the problems I faced was finding treble instruments for this introduction. If you just look through these tracks, there aren't a lot of high register instruments for me to work with. I needed to find some instrument or set of instruments to play this opening music, which is in a high register and moves fairly quickly. So I'll play through a few of the options. To be honest, none of them work all that well for this kind of music. Alto flutes are much more effective in the low register and have a soft and delicate but really rich timbre. Not really suitable for what I'm trying to do. Wagner tubas kind of similarly have a really warm, rounded sound. I don't really want to go all that high with them. Flugelhorns go fairly high, up to the high C, but just because they were sampled up there doesn't mean that it's a good option. especially when you're moving very quickly around notes. You'll see it's got a lovely sound in the low register, but when I moved up higher, it sounded a little bit strained. The legato transition is quite slow. This is a great patch for medium to low register slower melodies, not high register quicker melodies. And actually that's the same problem with the high strings patch. Orchestral Tools recorded a really slow legato transition, so it's perfect for certain types of music and aesthetics, but not for up-tempo, joyous melodies. It sounds great at slow tempos, but as soon as I try and play quickly, it sounds kind of fake to me. So that left me with the keyboard instruments like organ and piano and harmonium. So I pretty much rely on them to carry most of the high register lines in the beginning, as they're really the only instruments that can do it effectively. But it makes for a very bizarre sounding Christmas timbre. Here are just the keyboard instruments in the introduction. I'll add in everyone else now and play through the entire arrangement. I chose to have organ carry most of the main melody, and I actually quite like how it sounds. I blend in a bit of the Metropolis Ark choir patches towards the end, and I think that the children's choir patch works especially well with this aesthetic. So here it is. So there you go. I think it's an interesting challenge to try and make this work. And originally I planned to make the entire arrangement using this library, but after I got this far, I just gave up and switched over to using the Berlin series libraries for a much more traditional orchestral Christmas aesthetic. Once again, I only arranged the first minute or so, but I could see myself at some point finishing this and maybe even trying to get it performed next year. I'll play through the introduction one section at a time so you can more clearly hear the roles of each section. I've given oboes the main motivic part, with the other winds mostly trilling. All of the upper winds come together on the main lyrical part, with bassoons playing the bass notes. And all of the woodwind runs are manually programmed in. They're not a runs patch or anything. So onto the brass. The brass section is featured heavily in this arrangement, and specifically trumpets are highlighted. Trumpets have the main motivic line, low brass pick it up as well as it moves down in register, and horns are mostly given sustaining chords with the occasional swell or crescendo. Next we have strings. I give the violins runs alongside the woodwinds, and these are actually the scales patches from Berlin strings. They sound a little too clean on their own, but in the context of the full orchestra, I think they work nicely. The upper strings have sustaining tremolos in the beginning, then the full string section comes together in the low register. It works its way back up, at which point the violins are doubling on the main line. Lastly, the percussion section, having cymbal crashes, timpani, and tubular bells seemed essential. The suspended cymbal rolls also help bring us into the important downbeats alongside the woodwind and string runs. I also bring in marimba and xylophone to help punctuate the ascending woodwind and string lines towards the end. So I'll play the whole thing. I chose to give the first statement of the melody to a brass quintet. That's 2 trumpets, a French horn, a trombone, and a tuba. I really like the timbral contrast between the introduction and this first statement. If you're interested in the MIDI file, I'll post it on my Patreon page, along with the audio stems, Dorico file, and Cubase file. Almost all the tracks that I use are from the SINE versions of Berlin strings, winds, brass, and percussion. So here it is, and I hope you enjoy. So that's it. It's really quite short, but I hope you enjoyed it. I just want to mention, for those interested in private composition and orchestration lessons online, my winter sale of 33% off, a total of 5 lessons, is still ongoing until December 31st of this year. You can purchase the 5 lessons before the end of the year and then schedule the lessons basically any time in January or even later. Thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a wonderful holiday season and a relaxing end to 2021. See you next time.